What if everything we think we know about our ancestors is a lie? What if we are actually the Neanderthal leftovers from a far more advanced civilization? A civilization so advanced that it could harvest free energy from the ether. So advanced and out of a science fiction movie that these pyramids actually allowed for teleportation. I know, it sounds crazy, but how else do you explain the fact that these marvelous structures can be found all around Earth? You have Gunung Padang in Indonesia, La Danta in Guatemala, Cholula in Puebla, and of course Giza in Egypt. And that's just to name a few. I mean, are all these pyramids really built completely independent of each other? Most mainstream archaeologists say yes, but reality is that none of them can explain why these pyramids were built, how they were built, and most importantly, who these people were. Yesterday we rented a car in Mexico City to go see the beautiful city of Puebla, and today the journey continues to the mystical Teotihuacan pyramids. What is that? Illuminati! On our drive from Puebla, we saw Bill Gates' Mexican cottage house and fed some homeless dogs. Is it Mother Teresa of dogs, Amalia?
They look hungry.
So we are going to the pyramids of Mexico City. Amalia, are you with me?
Yes.
No one really knows who made these pyramids, what happened.
I am beyond excited for today.
¿Qué puede usar este ruido?
El jaguar.
¿El cuál?
Jaguar, jaguar.
Ah, it's a jaguar.
jaguar.
¿Tienes a jaguars aquí?
Anterior.
Ah, okay. I read online that this article, a guy, he was super annoyed here because all the parents, they would buy these things for their kids, and then they would walk around just screaming.
We are not here to buy stuff. We're here to look at something much more interesting.
You make it?
Yes.
Can we trust that?
Really? Thank you for you.
Gracias,
Have
amigo.
a nice day.
So, Amelie, we start out actually buying tourist stuff, but 250 pesos for that, made out of real stones.
You know, he probably got more than he imagined, and we paid less than we imagined, and that's a good deal.
This is a big one, Pyramid of the Sun, and then you have Pyramid of the Moon in the back. You know, one of the problems I have with this need for understanding the history here is that us humans, we crave the certainty on such a high level that we are willing to sacrifice the things we don't know, but somehow yet make it all fit into a box where it's like, that's the explanation.
Experts believe that this pyramid city was created around 100 years before Christ. It's believed that the population was between 125 to 200,000 people. We also know that the whole city is astronomically aligned, and no one has been able to decipher any of the Teotihuacan scripts. The fall of the Teotihuacan Empire is supposedly 700 AD due to an internal uprising of the working class against the ruling elite. How the historians came to that conclusion without having any clue who these people were seems a bit silly. So we spent the better half of last night actually researching and learning a lot about these pyramids. And one thing we noticed doing this is that there are so many contradicting thoughts about what is going on here. But one common agreement is that the Mayans have been here and the Aztecs has been here. That is for sure.
How do we even know that the Aztecs found this place?
The Aztecs is a group of people that made a certain kind of tools and sacrificing things. And you have found those things in the soil here, and that's how people, they know.
You sure you're not a history teacher?
Well, I just listened when we were listening to the videos yesterday. I might get it wrong, who knows?
I was watching Sopranos, best scenes.
Before and way before.
Like, look how well kept this is when you think about it.
One thing that is really interesting that I just heard is how they used water. They actually used water running on every 7 plateau as like an energy, kind of energy. So they were like sacrificing the water, and then at the same time they had all this water coming out of the dragon's heads and the snake's head, so that you actually had this sound going on here.
But how do we know this?
I don't know.
This is my problem with history. We always have an answer. We always know what has happened thousands of years ago. I don't even know who my great-great-grandfather or great-great-grandparents are, you know? How do we know all of this? Do we have long books that has all this information? The cool thing about coming here in your own car is that you can actually drive around the whole city and park your car.
Yeah, because otherwise you are dropped off at the beginning and then you have to walk 6 kilometers to the other end. I guess a bus would pick you up at that end too. But
I think it's 6 kilometers back and forth. For some divine reason, I feel like shopping here. I really like the souvenirs they have here.
You're incontrollable, Jon.
El precio?
550.
For some absurd reason, I like the back of it more.
That's what she said.
300.
450.
No thanks.
Now, we're not historians nor archaeologists, but something doesn't make sense here. Are you telling me that these structures were created around the same era as the Roman Empire? To our eyes, this looks much older than the alleged 2,000 years it holds. And to think that this city was actually inhabited by the Teotihuacan people until 700 AD seems unlikely.
How can we know so much about the Roman Empire but zero about this? The simple answer has to be, well, this advanced civilization is far older. In fact, some of the archaeologists believe it goes all the way back to the Ice Age. That's more than 11,000 years. I'm very impressed. I mean, it's crazy how beautiful it is. And even like between the stones that are covered in concrete, you have decorative features with smaller stones.
Imagine that the Aztecs, they discovered it in the 1400s. Jungle has to have taken over this whole place.
Actually, the first pyramid we saw was digged free from the soil in the 1820s, I think it was.
Normally you can walk to the top, but because of conservation efforts
And COVID.
and COVID, they are not allowing it anymore. So that's a bit shame because I would have loved to see the
But-
view from up there.
And although I agree that we have to preserve it, I'm also like, dude, this stood all kinds of weather, sandstorms, earthquakes, everything.
It can handle some dumb tourist, okay?
Yeah.
So the Pyramid of the Sun, it's aligned astronomically perfectly.
Well, they all are.
Yeah, so that's very interesting how they did that. And also, most travel guides says that it's the second or third largest pyramid in the world, but it's actually the 7th. So tallest. But I mean, is it just stones all the way in behind? Is it just layer upon layer with stones?
That's where you go to History Channel and read.
Instead of a simple pile of mud, the core of this building is a complex man-made honeycomb of rock and mortar.
Teotihuacan is actually used to be one of the major exporter of obsidian. So that's why you have all these souvenirs here. And obsidian, due to its hardness, was used for tools and weapons back in the day. So that's why I want to get a souvenir. It's a cool souvenir. Right there? Are you researching?
No, I'm texting your mother actually.
What is my mother saying?
She just visited my father.
Ooh.
No dirty business though.
One thing I don't understand completely is that did they live here also? And was this the houses?
They say that there was palaces where they lived and had ceremonies.
This is Instagram reality. When you walk around here on the Avenue of the Dead, it's called, you really feel small. Some of these souvenirs, I think, are portraying how we think of the Teotihuacan people. You don't know anything about the people who created all this, so it's like a legend where all we can do is just imagine who were they. We also just asked about the obsidian. Is it actually real, all the obsidian souvenirs?
And no, it's not.
It's a combination. Some of them are real, the expensive ones, the cheap one, the one we bought,
Fake as shit. Yeah.
So the way you can test if it's real is by scratching another stone, because it's so hard that you can't scratch it.
Yeah.
It's like sapphire on a watch. Y el precio para eso?
70.
Gracias, amigo. We bought a half-finished real obsidian knife. Here you can see before and after.
Yeah, that is true. Especially people from the spiritual world believe in all these energies that are connecting the earth to the sky or to the heaven, right? And I think if you have that approach, this site becomes very interesting because you have all these pointy structures that are actually supposed to harvest the energy of the earth and the sun combined, or the moon. I like to think that that was the whole purpose of it, that it was actually like a kind of an energy source.
But in today's world, everybody laugh at you like you're some Looney Tune.
Yes, of course.
Trust the science, guys. It's like science and above anything.
No, because a lot of spirituality can be explained with science as well. This is why a lot of scientists doesn't believe in a god,
Science,
right?
spirituality can be explained with science. What do you
Well,
mean?
spiritual structures can often be explained with science. So that's why you can combine it. You don't have to be either or.
How come they agreed on making pyramids here and also in Egypt and other places around the world, like way before Christopher Columbus, way before we had communication tools like we have today? Like how come? That is very interesting for me to think about, and yeah, no one can explain why.
No. I'm wondering what made them build it in this location.
It could be resources around, because if this really was a huge city back then, how did the system work with food and drinks and all that? How did they didn't have cars, they didn't have airplanes. What if they were much more advanced than us back then? What if they had technology that was considered much more high-tech than today? What if like having airplanes to move from A to B is just like an unnecessity?
I watched this documentary yesterday about this exact site, that recently they found all these tunnels underneath the pyramids that are supposed to be much older than the actual pyramids, which means that all of a sudden you have to rewrite history, right? Because we think we're so certain of one thing, and then something new pops up and we have to reconsider everything we think is the truth.
Which is what science is today also.
Well, it has always been, because you can't really say that you know anything when you get new information, right? That's normal. It makes sense.
But that's why, What
are you doing with your head?
When you look back the last 100 years, every like decade or 2 decades, scientific consensus changes because new research has come out to prove something different. It's true, Amalia. Humans like to be certain, and I certainly don't like that. And how is it, Amalia, that all the foundations are perfectly intact, but there's nothing on top of it?
Well, this was covered in soil and mud, right? So they had to dig everything free.
Yeah.
And I overheard a guide saying that everything that stood above crumbled apart and was ruined by weather conditions, and the rest underneath the soil survived. On this pyramid of the moon, it was said that it had a big chamber, like a temple on top, with one room. So maybe that was made out of wood or something else. And obviously that wouldn't survive, right? So the plateau stops where the temple started.
So you think they went from massive stone formation to let's put wood on top?
Well, if you look at China, for example, that's what they did because it was more beautiful to decorate the wood.
China.
It really is hard to argue against the notion that an advanced civilization once roamed these lands. There is no chance hunters and gatherers were capable of building this. The fact that we don't have a clue about what really happened here is enough to make us question everything we think we know about our past.
The pyramids were cool, but the souvenirs were even cooler.
I am so happy that we got to see the pyramids. You cannot travel to Mexico without it. Anyway, it's time to go back to Mexico City. And from there we are taking this bus to Mexico's #1 city for expats, San Miguel de Allende. This beautiful town is being taken over by Americans with laptops and healthy bank accounts. But it's still one of the most charming places we have ever been.